They laughed when my wife threw my business cards in the trash at Easter dinner. Her father picked one out of the garbage. His wine glass shattered on the floor. This title, is this real? That's when their worlds started crumbling. I didn't just take their contracts. I took everything. My name is Blake Richmond. I'm 42 years old, and for the last 12 years, I've been married to Stephanie Blackwell, now Stephanie Richmond. Her family owns Blackwell Construction Group, a network of contracting companies that's been operating across the Mid-Atlantic for 3 generations. They built their empire on handshakes, country club connections, and the kind of old money confidence that mistakes inheritance for achievement. I came from nothing. My father was a concrete mixer operator who taught me that real power isn't loud. It's patient. It waits. It builds in silence while everyone else is busy talking. That Easter Sunday started like every other holiday with the Blackwells. Their estate in Fairfax County sprawled across 8 acres, the kind of place where the driveway alone costs more than most people's houses. I pulled up in my truck, same Ford F-250 I'd driven for 6 years. Stephanie hated that truck, said it made us look poor. Inside, the dining room was set with china that probably cost more than my first year's salary. Howard, Stephanie's father, stood at the head of the table in a navy blazer, holding court like he always did. Her mother Gloria fussed over the lamb, and Uncle Francis sat in the corner, nursing his second bourbon before the meal even started. I was slicing the glazed ham when Stephanie picked up the small stack of business cards I'd left on the side table. They were matte black, minimalist design. Clean. Professional. "What are these?" she asked, her voice already carrying that edge. "Business cards," I said. "Just had them printed." She didn't even look at them properly. Just fanned them out like a deck of cards and laughed. "Did you seriously print these yourself? What is this, 2005? Her cousin Derek snorted wine through his nose. Even Gloria chimed in from across the room. "Well, it's the thought that counts, dear." Then Stephanie did something I'll never forget. She walked to the kitchen trash can and dropped them in, just like that. The sound of those cards hitting the garbage bag seemed louder than it should have. "Nobody cares," she said, turning back to the table with a smirk. The room erupted. Derek made a joke about pyramid schemes. Gloria's sister asked if I bought them in an office supply store. Even Howard shook his head, that tight-lipped smile he wore whenever he thought I was playing dress-up in his world. I didn't react. I've learned that silence is a weapon. The longer you let people talk, the more they expose about themselves. But then Francis, Uncle Francis, pushed back from the table. He'd been quiet most of the meal, watching the circus with tired eyes. He walked over to the trash can, bent down, and pulled one of the cards out like he was retrieving something sacred. He squinted at it, adjusting his glasses. Then he went completely still. The wine glass in his other hand slipped. It hit the tile floor, and the stem snapped clean off. Red wine spread across the white grout like a crime scene. Everyone stopped. Forks froze midair. Even the dog quit begging. Francis stared at the card, then at me. His voice came out hoarse, confused. "This title," he said slowly, "is this real?" Nobody answered. He looked at me, suddenly sober. "You're executive partner of Titan Materials Holdings?" I nodded once. "Calm. No theatrics." Stephanie's fork clattered against her plate. "Wait, what's Titan Materials?" Francis cut her off, his eyes still locked on the card. "You don't know." Howard leaned forward from the head of the table, irritated. "Francis, don't start with your dramatics." But Francis ignored him. He was still staring at the card like it was a bomb. "Titan just won the Eastern Seaboard infrastructure contract," Francis said, his voice shaking slightly. "The one every major contractor was bidding on. You know who lost it?" "Howard." "We did." The room went silent. Francis pointed at me. "And you're telling me he's the one behind it?" I reached for the sweet potatoes, calm as ever. "It was a competitive process," I said. Stephanie blinked, her mouth slightly open. One of the younger cousins finally broke the silence. "What's an infrastructure contract?" Nobody answered him. I took another bite. The ham was overcooked. Not terrible, but nothing special. What wasn't forgettable was watching the exact moment Stephanie's family realized they'd been sitting across from someone they never bothered to see. Howard's face had gone pale. Gloria set down her wine glass with a trembling hand. Derek wasn't laughing anymore. And Stephanie, she just stared at me like I was a stranger. Francis kept holding that card, his hand shaking slightly. "How long?" he asked quietly. "Long enough." I replied. That's when I knew I wouldn't have to say another word that night. The silence would do the rest. Francis caught me on the back, terrace 20 minutes later. The others were still inside, probably trying to piece together what just happened. The April air had a bite to it, but his voice cut sharper. I thought Titan Materials was a shell company, Francis said, his breath coming out in small clouds. Rumors. Ghost bids. No public board. He looked down at the business card still clutched in his hand, like he couldn't quite believe it was real. You're the executive partner, he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't need theatrics. Just nodded. He leaned against the railing like someone had knocked the wind out of him. My God. He ran his hand through his gray hair. You're the one who outbid us on the Eastern Seaboard contract. The federal infrastructure project. Highways, bridges, supply chain integration. He looked up at me, and I could see him doing the math behind those tired eyes. We spent 14 months preparing that bid. Francis continued, his voice dropping. Howard mortgaged 2 properties to finance the proposal. And you just sealed it. Closed last Monday. I said, keeping my tone flat. His mouth hung open. I could see the dominoes falling in his head. Blackwell Construction had been banking on that contract to expand their footprint into Virginia and Maryland. It wasn't just a deal. It was their lifeline for the next decade. Inside, someone laughed. Probably Derek making another joke at my expense, still thinking I was the punchline. Francis wiped his face with his palm. Does Howard know? I mean, really know what you've done? Not yet, I said. He exhaled hard, pinching the bridge of his nose. Jesus, you realize this affects our entire material supply chain? We've been sourcing concrete, rebar, asphalt through your network for the past 8 months without knowing it. I'll let that sink in. You've boxed us in, Francis said quietly. We're dependent on you now. For materials. For pricing. For everything. He paused, staring out at the manicured lawn. And Howard's still in there mocking you, like you're someone's assistant. I shrugged. People see what they want to see. Francis studied me for a long moment. You're not going to tell him tonight, are you? Would it change anything? I asked. His jaw tightened. He knew the answer. It would humiliate them. I took the card back from his hand and slipped it into my wallet. They've had that opportunity all night. I didn't wait for a response. Just stepped back toward the house, leaving Francis alone on the terrace with his thoughts and his scotch. Inside, the noise felt distant. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the smug conversations. They all seemed so far removed from reality. I found Stephanie in the living room, talking to her mother about some charity gala. She barely glanced up when I approached. Leaving already? She asked, distracted. Yeah, I said. Early morning tomorrow. More empire building, she said with that same mocking tone she'd used all evening. I just smiled. Something like that. I kissed her on the cheek out of habit and walked out. The truth was, I hadn't planned to bring those cards. They'd been sitting in my truck for a week. Fresh print run, because the old title was outdated. I slipped them into my jacket pocket on a whim. What they didn't know, what they wouldn't know until much later, was that Titan Materials Holdings had finalized 4 major acquisitions that same week. Not just the federal contract, but the companies that supplied aggregate, concrete plants, steel fabrication, and yes, the asphalt production facilities that Blackwell Construction depended on. They weren't about to learn who I was. They were about to learn what I owned. And it wouldn't come in a headline. It would come in an invoice. By Monday morning, the whispers had turned into phone calls. Stephanie's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She sat at the kitchen island, coffee untouched, scrolling through messages that had gone from casual to frantic overnight. Her cousin Rachel sent a link to a business journal article. Another cousin forwarded a screenshot from LinkedIn. Then came the call from Jennifer, the family's self-appointed keeper of gossip. Steph, Jennifer said, breathless. No greeting. Tell me this isn't true. What isn't true? Stephanie asked, still scrolling. Your husband. Did he actually take over Summit Aggregate? Stephanie laughed, but it sounded hollow. What? No. Blake's still running his materials consulting thing. Consulting. Jennifer's voice went up an octave. Stephanie, Summit is gone. Absorbed. Folded into something called Titan Materials Holdings. Effective last week. Their emails are bouncing. Everything's been redirected. Stephanie stopped scrolling. Wait, you're serious? I work procurement for Foster Industrial, Jennifer said. We source through Summit. Half our Q2 inventory was supposed to come through them. Now all our contacts redirect to Titan domains. A A pause. Did you know about this? Stephanie stared at her reflection in the microwave door. No, she said slowly. I didn't. Jennifer hung up without saying goodbye. Stephanie set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. The house felt too quiet, too still. She stood and walked to Blake's home office. The door wasn't locked. It never was. He'd never needed locks. His laptop sat open on the desk, screen dark. She hesitated for just a second, then moved the mouse. The screen lit up. No password. He'd never bothered with one at home. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for. Maybe proof this was also a mistake. Some mix-up with similar company names. Instead, she found a folder labeled Q1 Acquisitions Confirmed. She clicked it. A spreadsheet appeared. 43 companies listed. Some at aggregate. Riverside Concrete, Continental Rebar, Keystone Asphalt. Every single one showed the same status. Integrated Titan Materials Holdings. Email threads with addresses ending in @titanmaterials.com. An internal memo welcoming 8 new regional managers, all names she recognized from her father's vendor network. Her throat went dry. Then she heard it. The shower upstairs turning off. She slammed the laptop shut and backed out of the office like she'd walked into the wrong room. Blake came downstairs 5 minutes later, towel around his shoulders, hair still damp. Calm as ever. He didn't look surprised to find her standing in the hallway. You went through my files, he said. Not a question. She didn't answer. Couldn't. He walked past her to the kitchen, poured himself coffee. Added nothing. Took a sip. Then, without anger, without triumph, he looked at her and said, Next time you throw something away, check what's printed on it first. Stephanie opened her mouth, closed it. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make this worse. Because in that moment, it hit her. This wasn't one lucky deal. This wasn't Blake stumbling into success. This was a network, a web, and not the kind her family played golf with. This was infrastructure, real power. She thought he was tinkering in the garage while the adults talked business. But she'd been wrong. The man she'd mocked for printing his own business cards had just folded half her family's supply chain into a company she couldn't even pronounce correctly 2 days ago. She remembered Easter dinner, when Francis asked if the title was real. When the room went cold, she'd laughed, tried to brush it off. But Francis hadn't laughed, and neither would her father, once he saw what was already unraveling. Because this wasn't about pride anymore. This was about control, and she just realized how little of it they had left. It was nearly midnight when she heard her father's voice echo through the hallway downstairs. Stephanie had come down for water, but stopped at the bottom of the stairs when she heard the tone. It wasn't his usual commanding presence. It was something tighter, strained. She moved quietly toward the kitchen, barefoot on hardwood. Her father hadn't noticed her. His back was to the hallway, hunched over the island, one hand gripping his phone, the other rubbing his temple. No, Francis confirmed it. Howard was saying into the phone. The bid's gone. They secured the entire Eastern Seaboard contract under some umbrella structure. Titan Materials Holdings. A pause. No, not public. Quiet as hell. That's what makes it so damn frustrating. No board presence. No press releases. Everyone thought Keystone would roll in as primary supplier for the state projects. Now we're scrambling. Stephanie's heart dropped. Titan Materials Holdings. The same name from Blake's laptop. She stepped into the kitchen carefully. Dad. He turned, startled. His face was flushed. Not from alcohol. From stress. What are you doing up? He asked, quickly muting the phone. I heard you mention Titan Materials, she said quietly. His expression shifted. Defensive. Annoyed. Yes. What about it? She swallowed hard. That's the name on Blake's business card. For 3 full seconds, Howard just stared at her. Then realization hit him, like a freight train. Your husband, he said slowly, is tied to Titan Materials. She didn't answer. Her silence said everything. Howard let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Jesus Christ. No wonder Francis looked like he'd seen a ghost. She moved toward the counter slowly, her voice quieter now. You're saying his company beat yours? Beat us? Howard snapped. They didn't beat us. They came in under the radar, swept the contract, bundled materials, logistics, manufacturing, everything. It's not just this one deal, Stephanie. His voice rose. We're exposed. Francis says they've got control over at least 6 of our primary suppliers. I don't even know what we're dependent on anymore. The panic in his voice shattered something inside her. She'd grown up believing her father was untouchable. He'd once made a city councilman apologize in public. Now he looked like a man realizing the ground beneath him had been eroding for years. Stephanie sat down slowly at the island, the granite cold beneath her palms. He never talked about it, she said, half to herself. Not once. Never mentioned Titan. I thought he was still dealing with that small consulting firm. The startup thing. Howard snorted. That was probably a front. Smoke and mirrors. He leaned on the counter. Did you ever ask what he was actually doing? What those late nights were about? She had. Once or twice. But she'd stopped asking when his answers bored her. I checked his laptop, she admitted. Friday. I found contracts. Some at Aggregate. Riverside Concrete. Keystone Asphalt. There's more. A lot more. Howard exhaled, running both hands through his graying hair. So he's not just involved. He is Titan. Stephanie didn't know what to say. All she could think of was Easter dinner. The laughter. The mocking. The way she'd tossed those cards like trash. The way she dismissed him in front of everyone. And now, just days later, the company name on those cards was dismantling her family's empire from the inside out. Don't tell anyone yet, Howard said, pacing now. We need to understand how deep this goes before it gets worse. But it was already worse. She could feel it. Titan wasn't some lucky upstart with good timing. It was a machine, built piece by the man she belittled for 12 years. He didn't wear custom suits, didn't chase headlines. He chased leverage. And now, with every supplier that disappeared, every contract that evaporated, her father's world was collapsing. And Blake was holding the detonator. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my downtown office when my assistant buzzed through. Blake, there's a Henry Cordell on line 2. Says it's personal. I've been expecting this call for 3 weeks. Henry Cordell. The name Howard Blackwell had erased from every family photo, every business record, every conversation for the past 35 years. I picked up. Mr. Cordell. Blake. His voice was gravelly, aged by decades of cigarettes and bitterness. I heard you finally made your move. Word travels fast, I said. In this business, it always does. He paused. I wanted to thank you for giving me a front row seat to watch that family finally get what's coming. Henry Cordell had been Howard's original partner back in 1988. Together, they'd built Blackwell Construction from a 2-truck operation into a regional player. Then Howard bought him out using a legal loophole that left Henry with nothing but a lawsuit he couldn't afford to fight. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part came 6 months ago when I was reviewing acquisition documents for a small insurance company. Buried in their medical records archive, I found something that didn't add up. A paternity test from 1989, ordered by Gloria Blackwell. The results showed Howard wasn't the biological father of their eldest child. That child was Francis. The real father? Henry Cordell. I'd sat on that information for months, waiting for the right moment. That moment was now. I need to ask you something, I said. Does Francis know? Henry was quiet for a long moment. No. Gloria paid the clinic to bury the results. Threatened them with lawsuits if anyone ever spoke about it. I only found out 5 years later through a lab tech who felt guilty. Why didn't you tell him? Because by then, Francis was 12 years old. Howard had raised him. I'd already lost everything else. I wasn't going to blow up a kid's life for my own revenge. His voice hardened. But now that kid's almost 70, and Howard's about to lose everything. Maybe it's time Francis knew the truth about the man he calls father. I leaned back in my chair. I'm not in the business of destroying families, Henry. No, he agreed. You're in the business of dismantling empires. But this information, it's yours to use however you see fit. Consider it a gift from one ghost to another. He hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the file on my desk. Inside was a copy of that paternity test. Medical records showing Gloria's payment to the clinic. Handwritten notes in her own writing. This never happened. No one can know. The question wasn't whether to use it. The question was when. Because this wasn't just about business anymore. This was about cutting the legs out from under the foundation Howard had built his entire identity on. His eldest son. His legacy. His heir. None of it was his. I made a copy of the file and sealed it in an envelope. Addressed it to Francis Blackwell, care of his home address. Then I put it in my desk drawer. Not yet, but soon. Because sometimes the most devastating moves aren't the ones you make immediately. They're the ones you let simmer. The ones that force people to live with the weight of what's coming before it finally arrives. Howard had spent 35 years believing he'd buried his secrets deep enough that they'd never surface. He was wrong. And Francis? He was about to learn that the man he'd spent his entire life defending had been lying to him since the day he was born. I didn't need to destroy Howard's business to break him. I just needed to destroy the lie he'd built his family on. The news broke on a Friday morning. Not with a headline, but with a quiet email from the Securities and Exchange Commission to Howard Blackwell's personal attorney. Notice of investigation, Blackwell Construction Group, potential securities violations, and tax irregularities. I wasn't supposed to know about it yet, but I had people everywhere now. People who owed me favors. People who understood that information was more valuable than money. The investigation had started 8 weeks ago. An anonymous tip about discrepancies in Blackwell's public contracts, inflated invoices, misreported material costs, payments to shell companies that didn't deliver services. All of it true. All of it documented. All of it submitted by me. I'd spent 3 years collecting evidence. Every shady deal Howard had ever cut. Every corner he'd trimmed. Every kickback he'd paid to local officials to secure bids. He'd been careful, but not careful enough. And in construction, paper trails are everywhere if you know where to look. The beauty of it was the timing. Right as Blackwell Construction was trying to recover from losing the federal contract. Right as they were scrambling to restructure debt. Right as their suppliers were being absorbed into Titan Materials. This wasn't just a business problem anymore. This was existential. My phone rang. Francis. Blake, we need to talk, he said, his voice tight. Howard just got served with an SEC notice. I heard, I said calmly. You heard. Francis's voice rose slightly. How did you? He stopped. Then quieter. It was you. I didn't deny it. My God. Francis breathed. You didn't just take the contracts. You're taking everything. I submitted evidence of illegal activity to federal authorities. I said, what they choose to do with that information is up to them. Blake, they're talking about criminal charges. Howard could go to prison. Then he should have followed the law, I replied. Francis was silent for a moment. I knew you were strategic. I didn't realize you were ruthless. I'm not ruthless, Francis. I'm thorough. There's a difference. Is there? He asked bitterly. Yes, I said. Ruthless would be fabricating evidence. I just collected what was already there. Howard built this house of cards. I'm just the wind that knocked it over. Francis exhaled slowly. Stephanie's a wreck. Gloria's having panic attacks. Howard won't come out of his study. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I meant it. Not for Howard, but for the collateral damage. Are you? Francis asked. Because for where I'm standing, this looks like revenge. This is justice, I corrected. There's a difference there too. Francis hung up without another word. I set the phone down and looked out my office window at the Richmond skyline. Titan Materials Holdings occupied 3 floors of this building now. 68 employees. 14 subsidiaries. Revenue projections that would put us in the top 10 construction supply companies in the region by year's end. And Howard Blackwell. He was about to lose everything he'd spent 40 years building. Not because I was cruel, but because I'd learned something he never understood. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It just waits until the moment is right, and then it moves with precision. Howard had taught me that lesson himself. Every time he dismissed me at dinner. Every time he laughed at my ambitions. Every time he treated me like I was playing dress-up in his world. He'd show me exactly what not to be. And now he was learning what happens when you underestimate the quiet man in the corner who's been taking notes the whole time. The SEC investigation would take months, maybe years, but the damage was already done. Banks would freeze credit lines. Partners would distance themselves. Clients would panic. Blackwell Construction would survive. Probably, but it would never be the same. And Howard would spend the rest of his life knowing that the man who destroyed him was the same man he'd mocked for printing his own business cards. The folder arrived at the house on a Tuesday afternoon. Standard manila envelope. No return address. Just my name printed on the front in clean block letters. Stephanie was in the kitchen when I sat on the coffee table. She'd been living in the house like a ghost for the past week. Barely speaking, barely eating, just scrolling through her phone, watching her family's world collapse in real time. What's that? She asked, her voice hollow. Open it, I said. She walked over slowly, like the envelope might explode. Picked it up, pulled out the papers inside. I watched her face as she read. Saw the exact moment it registered. Dissolution of marriage. Commonwealth of Virginia. Her hand started shaking. Blake, what is this? What looks like, I said calmly. You're divorcing me? Her voice cracked. Yes. Because of my family? Because of what they said? No, I said, sitting down across from her. Because of what you said. What you did. What you've been doing for 12 years. She set the papers down like they were burning her fingers. I made a mistake. One mistake. I threw away some business cards. I didn't know. It wasn't one mistake, Stephanie. My voice stayed level. It was a pattern. Every family dinner. Every business event. Every time I tried to share what I was building, you shut me down. Laughed at me. Made me feel small in front of people who already didn't respect me. I didn't mean. You meant every word. I cut her off. You just didn't think there would be consequences. She sank onto the couch. The papers spread on the table between us. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll apologize to your face, to everyone. Blake, please. I shook my head. I don't want an apology. I don't want counseling. I want a partnership. I want a partner. Someone who believed in me when no one else did. I paused. You weren't that person. You never were. So that's it. Her eyes filled with tears. 12 years and you're just done. I was done 7 years ago. I said quietly. I just didn't know it yet. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe I always had been. The terms are fair, I continued. No alimony. Assets split according to what each of us brought to the marriage. The house is yours. It's paid off. I kept the business, which you never believed in anyway. She picked up the papers again, scanning through them with trembling hands. Then she stopped, stared at one line. You're keeping the dog? Her voice broke. Max is mine, I said. I paid for him, trained him, took care of him. You complained about him shedding on the furniture. That detail, that small thing, seemed to break something in her. The tears came then. Not dramatic, not loud, just silent and defeated. I loved you, she whispered. You loved the idea of me, I corrected. The version you thought you could shape into something your family would approve of. But I was never going to be that person. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Is there someone else? No. Then why now? Why like this? Because I'm done being invisible in my own marriage, I said. I built an empire while you laughed at my business cards. I secured contracts worth hundreds of millions while you told your friends I ran a hobby company. I became everything I said I would, and you never noticed because you never looked. I stood up, grabbed my keys from the side table. I had the papers delivered here instead of through a lawyer because I wanted to tell you myself. I said, you have 30 days to review them. Sign them. Your attorney can contact mine if there are any issues. But Stephanie, there won't be any issues. Because everything in those papers is fair. More than fair. She didn't look up. Just sat there, holding the divorce papers like they were a death certificate. I walked to the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I said, I did love you once. A long time ago. Before I realized you'd never love me back the way I needed. I left her there. Walked out of my truck. Max was waiting in the passenger seat, tail wagging. I drove to my new place. A downtown loft I bought 6 months ago. 3 bedrooms. Floor-to-ceiling windows. View of the James River. I'd been preparing for this moment longer than Stephanie realized. The divorce papers weren't a reaction. They were the final move in a strategy I've been building for years. You don't dismantle an empire overnight. You do it piece by piece. Contract by contract. Relationship by relationship. And when there's nothing left standing, you walk away clean. No anger. No revenge. Just closure. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing you won. I sent the letter on a Friday. Certified mail. Signature required. Inside was a single envelope addressed to Francis Blackwell. Inside that envelope was a copy of the paternity test from 1989, the medical records, Gloria's handwritten notes, and a letter from me. Francis, the man you've spent your life defending isn't who you think he is. What you do with this information is your choice. But you deserve to know the truth. Blake, I didn't tell anyone I'd send it. Didn't warn Howard or Gloria. Just put it in the mail and waited. The call came 3 days later. Not from Francis. From Howard. What the hell did you send to my brother? Howard's voice was shaking. Rage or fear? I couldn't tell. The truth, I said. You had no right. I had every right. I cut him off. You built your family on a lie, Howard. Francis deserved to know. He's devastated. He won't talk to anyone. He's locked himself in his house. He'll process it, I said. Eventually, Gloria's in the hospital, Howard continued, his voice cracking. Panic attack. The doctors say her blood pressure is dangerously high. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I meant it. Partially. Sorry. Howard laughed bitterly. You destroy my business. You divorce my daughter. You send my brother information that could kill my wife. And you're sorry. I didn't destroy your business, Howard. The SEC did that when they found evidence of your illegal activity. I didn't divorce Stephanie because of you. I divorced her because she never respected me. And I didn't send Francis that letter to hurt Gloria. I sent it because he had a right to know his father isn't his father. Silence on the other end. Henry Cordell is his father, Howard said finally. Isn't he? Yes. Howard let out a long, shaky breath. I thought I'd bury that deep enough. You can't bury the truth, Howard. You can only delay it. Why? He asked, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely broken. Why did you do all of this? Was it really just because we laughed at you? Because Stephanie threw away your business cards? No, I said. It was because you taught me something, Howard. You taught me that in your world, respect isn't given. It's taken. You taught me that power is quiet. That control comes from owning the infrastructure, not the spotlight. I paused. You taught me how to win by showing me exactly what losing looks like. And for that, I'm grateful. He hung up without another word. I set the phone down and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Francis was reading that letter for the 10th time. Gloria was in a hospital bed. Howard was watching 40 years of carefully constructed lies fall apart. And me? I was free. Free from a marriage that never valued me. Free from a family that never saw me. Free from the weight of trying to prove myself to people who'd already decided I wasn't worth their time. The funny thing about revenge is that it's not always about destruction. Sometimes it's just about truth. I didn't tear down Howard's empire to hurt him. I tore it down because it was built on the same foundation as his family. Lies, shortcuts, and the belief that no one would ever call him on it. I called him on it. And now he was learning what every empire learns eventually. The higher you build on sand, the harder you fall. The headline broke on a Thursday morning, not in some small trade publication, but in the Washington Post business section. From invisible to infrastructure, how Titan Materials quietly reshaped the mid-Atlantic construction industry. Below the title was a photo, not of me, just my business card, the same matte black card Stephanie had thrown in the trash. The article was thorough, detailed, a timeline of strategic acquisitions spanning 7 years. Anonymous shell LLCs, supplier networks consolidated under one umbrella. Federal contracts secured through meticulous preparation and competitive bidding. The journalist called it a masterclass in strategic patience. One quote from an industry analyst made me smile. Whoever built Titan Materials didn't want attention. They wanted infrastructure. And while everyone else was networking at country clubs, they were buying the roads those clubs were built on. My phone started buzzing before I'd finished my coffee. First it was Jennifer from Stephanie's social circle. Then Rachel. Then people I hadn't heard from in years. Is this you? Like actually you? Why didn't you say anything? Your wife must be so proud. That last one stung. Because by the time that article dropped, Stephanie wasn't my wife anymore. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. Quick, quiet, exactly how I planned it. But the social media response was something I hadn't anticipated. Someone found an old photo from Easter dinner 2 years ago. Stephanie holding a glass of wine, laughing. Me in the background, quiet, barely visible. Someone captioned it, "When you're too busy building an empire to care about the haters." It went viral. 50,000 shares in 6 hours. Then a video surfaced. Someone had recorded part of this year's Easter dinner on their phone. You could hear Stephanie's voice clearly. Nobody cares about your little business. Then the crash of Francis's wine glass hitting the floor. The video had 2 million views by evening. The comments section was ruthless. Imagine throwing away your husband's business card and finding out he owns half the construction supply chain. She's going to regret that for the rest of her life. My man stayed quiet and let his success do the talking. Respect. I didn't comment. Didn't share it. Didn't engage at all. But Stephanie saw it. Everyone saw it. Her phone blew up with messages. Some sympathetic. Most weren't. 3 days after the article dropped, I got a call from an investment group in Baltimore. They wanted to buy a minority stake in Titan Materials. 15% for $75 million. I declined. Politely. Because I didn't build Titan to sell it. I built it to own it. That weekend, I attended a construction industry gala in Washington, D.C., the kind of event Howard Blackwell used to dominate, where he'd hold court with senators and CEOs, cigar in one hand, bourbon in the other. He wasn't there this year. The SEC investigation had made him toxic. People avoided him like he carried a disease. But I was there, and people knew who I was now. A senator I'd never met shook my hand. Blake Richmond, I've been reading about you. Impressive operation you've built. Thank you, Senator. We should talk sometime. About infrastructure development. Federal contracts. Your company's exactly the kind of innovative operation we need more of. I gave him my card. The same card Stephanie had thrown away. He looked at it, read the title, and nodded with respect. Executive partner. You earned that. I spent the rest of the evening making connections. Real ones. Not the superficial country club handshakes Howard had built his reputation on, but actual partnerships with people who understood what I'd built and how I'd built it. Around 10 p.m., I saw Stephanie across the room. She was there with her mother, both of them dressed immaculately, trying to maintain appearances. Our eyes met for just a second. She looked away first. I didn't approach her. Didn't need to. The distance between us said everything that needed to be said. I left the gala early. Drove back to my loft with Max in the passenger seat. The city lights reflected off the James River, and for the first time in 12 years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because I destroyed anyone, but because I'd finally stopped letting other people's opinions define my worth. Howard's empire was crumbling. Francis had cut ties with the family. Gloria was still in and out of the hospital. Stephanie was learning what it meant to be on the outside looking in. And me? I was just getting started. The ceremony was held on a Saturday afternoon in Georgetown. Small. Intimate. Maybe 50 people. The building had been purchased 3 years earlier and converted into the Richmond Innovation Center, a place where young entrepreneurs could access resources, mentorship, and capital to build their own companies. The plaque outside read, "In honor of those who build in silence and succeeded in truth." I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. Former employees, business partners, people who'd been with me from the beginning. And one face I didn't expect to see, Francis Blackwell, sitting in the back row. After the ceremony, he approached me. He'd aged. Gray hair. Deeper lines around his eyes. But he looked lighter somehow. Less burdened. "Blake," he said, extending his hand. I shook it. "Francis, I'm surprised you came. I want to see what you'd built," he said. "The real version. Not the headlines or the articles. The actual thing." We walked through the center together. He saw the workshop spaces, the conference rooms, the young people working on prototypes and business plans. "This is incredible," Francis said quietly. "Howard could never have built something like this." "Howard was too busy protecting what he had," I said. "He never understood that real power comes from creating opportunities, not hoarding them." Francis nodded. I cut ties with him after I found out about everything. Haven't spoken to him in 2 years. "How is he?" I asked. "Surviving. Barely. The SEC fines nearly bankrupted him. He sold most of the company. Lives in a condo now. Gloria left him 6 months ago." Francis paused. "He's alone. And I think that's what finally broke him. Not the money. The isolation." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And I meant it. Sort of. "Don't be," Francis replied. "He made his choices, just like I made mine." He looked at me. "Thank you for sending me that letter. It destroyed me at first, but also freed me. I spent 70 years trying to earn the approval of a man who wasn't even my father. Now I know who I really am." "Who's that?" I asked. "Henry Cordell's son," he said with a slight smile. "And a better man than Howard Blackwell ever was." We shook hands again. He left. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of closure. Later that evening, I had dinner with someone I'd met 8 months earlier. Claire Davidson. Architect. Smart. Independent. Daughter of a construction executive who'd competed against Howard for decades. She knew my history, knew what I'd built and how. And she respected it. We talked about the future, about expansion plans for Titan Materials, about her firm's upcoming projects, about life beyond revenge and empire building. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked over dessert. "The way it all went down?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I regret the years I wasted trying to prove myself to people who didn't matter." But I don't regret building something real. Something that lasts. She smiled. Good answer. We left the restaurant and walked along the river. Max trotted beside us, happy and oblivious to everything except the evening breeze. Somewhere across town, Stephanie was probably scrolling through social media, seeing photos of me at yet another industry event, seeing my company's name in headlines, seeing the life I'd built after she dismissed it as impossible. Howard was probably sitting in his condo, wondering how the quiet son-in-law had dismantled 40 years of work in less than 2. Gloria was probably still trying to hold together a family that had shattered the moment the lies came to light. And Francis was probably having dinner with Henry Cordell, learning about the father he should have known his entire life. As for me, I was done looking back. Titan Materials Holdings was expanding into 3 new states. The Richmond Innovation Center was funding its 5th cohort of entrepreneurs. And I was building a life with someone who saw me for who I actually was, not who she wanted me to be. The man who'd been invisible at family dinners was now on the cover of business magazines. The man whose business cards had been thrown in the trash now had senators asking for his number. The man they'd mocked for printing his own cards now controlled the infrastructure their entire industry depended on. And the best part, I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I could. Because while they were busy laughing, I was busy building. And when the laughter stopped, I was the only one left standing.